Well, Malcolm Roberts is a One Nation senator for Queensland. Before going into politics, Malcolm was a coal mining engineer and a businessman. For many years, he has been a renowned climate change realist, skeptic, and has devoted long hours to studying the claims and theories about global warming. During his research, he discovered that politicians of all major parties told him that climate policies were based on the CSIRO's advice. His election as a senator in 2016 gave him the opportunity to cross-examine the evidence from the CSIRO directly, where he discovered, well, I'll let him tell, but he discovered that the CSIRO's science was far from robust and lacked, in the senator's opinion, both integrity and transparency. And it would appear that the CSIRO were unaware that the evidence they presented was based on poor quality and discredited scientific papers, according to Malcolm Roberts, who joins us now from Brisbane. How are you, Malcolm?
Oh, I'm well, thanks, Rowan. How are you?
Yeah, very...
Hello, Rita.
Yep.
G'day, James.
So we're thrilled to have you here to tell us exactly what you have discovered about the CSIRO. Take it away.
Well, let's put it in context, first of all. These policies, the climate policies and the renewables energy subsidies are costing us, as Alan Moran said last week, $13 billion a year, which is $1,300 per household. And this is what we found. CSIRO has never said carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. CSIRO's words. CSIRO admitted today's temperatures are not unprecedented. CSIRO cited papers that do not show a rate of temperature rise being unprecedented. CSIRO relied on discredited and poor quality papers on temperature and carbon dioxide and withdrew some of them. CSIRO revealed little understanding of papers they cited as evidence, and even put papers forward later after they withdrew them that contradicted the earlier paper. CSIRO ultimately, Rowan, relies on unvalidated computer models giving erroneous projections. That's all they have. And that's not policy grade, as David Evans will show. CSIRO admits to no due diligence on the UN IPCC, the climate body from the UN, nor on the data source, the Bureau of Meteorology. CSIRO allows politicians to misrepresent CSIRO without correction and let these fabrications spread. CSIRO misled Parliament.
OK, well, let me pick you up there, Malcolm. How did CSIRO mislead the Parliament, in your opinion?
Well, what they've done is that one of their senior executives has made statements that are false in Senate estimates. Their chief executive has also made statements that imply they've got evidence, but when they do not. They've implied falsely that I've been given the evidence when I have not, and we're happy to discuss that openly. And by the way, Rowan, these are not my conclusions alone. I've tested it with international scientists from around the world, 5 different countries plus Australia, and they all just laugh at what the CSIRO has presented to us in 4 presentations now, 4, and they're just a joke.
OK, well, let's pick up on a couple of those things before... one is... The 2 things that seem to be all about is the unprecedented rate of change in the climate. And you've pinned them down repeatedly on that. So explain what the unprecedented rate of change in the climate that they've claimed, and yet their inability to answer where it has occurred.
OK, the first time they presented a paper to us, they came back to us and with evidence. Now, remember, this is after 40 to 50 years of climate research. They came back with 1 paper claiming unprecedented temperature and rate of temperature rise. That was by Marcotte, 2013. That was discredited within 2 weeks of its appearance in 2013. Now, Marcotte relies upon a fabrication of a data point. He did an original PhD, had no startling temperature uptick in the 20th century. He was then joined by 2 UN climate authors, and they suddenly found, with the same data, after manipulating the data, an uptick. Marcotte himself, Rowan, said that you cannot rely upon the 20th century temperatures that are in his paper. They're not robust. So then, when we pointed these things out, and Marcotte also said you cannot identify anything less than 300 years. in time spent.
Okay, so what he's saying is that there's no increase in the temperatures. Now, the other thing you asked them was about carbon dioxide and the link between man-made carbon dioxide and global warming. How did they respond to those questions?
Well, they gave us a paper by Harries in 2001, and that paper was also discredited. And that paper used two separate data points measured by two separate instruments, and so that was wrong for a start. And they didn't seem to know these things about Marcotte nor about Harries. They withdrew both papers and gave us alternatives. The second alternative they gave us on carbon dioxide actually verified what we said about Harries. Now, what they said, what Harries did was the minimum duration between measurements is 1,000 years, sometimes 6,000 years. The blip that we've seen in carbon dioxide levels is 0.009% of the atmosphere over just 60 years. There's no way you'd identify that in Harries' methodology. Harries' methodology was crook, and it's just not suitable. No other papers they presented either showed that carbon dioxide levels are unprecedented, nor that temperatures are unprecedented.
So when you
rate of temperature rise is unprecedented.
So when you ask the CSIRO to prove that man-made global warming has an impact on the environment, what do they say?
Well,
man-made carbon dioxide, rather.
We said, what, if anything, shows that there's danger from human carbon dioxide? And they said, no, we've never said there's danger, and we never will say there's danger. And we said, well, I've interviewed many MPs and written letters to them, and they all say it comes from you. And they said, well, you'll have to ask the politicians about that. This has been a trumped-up fabrication from MPs.
Rita.
I'm just a little bit confused with what you're saying. You know, CSIRO is giving contradictory statements. They misled Parliament, but you're not suggesting that that was deliberate. I mean, when you're looking at this sort of data, isn't it just going to be something that occurs where you might inadvertently interpret information a certain way that it turns out to be inaccurate? Do you think these are just accidents of doing the job they do?
I don't know what goes on in these people's minds and hearts, Rita. We know there's a lot of groupthink within the CSIRO, and they follow the political agenda. We know from a former research scientist, many scientists within the CSIRO, including a chief research scientist, Garth Paltridge, who said many years ago that CSIRO has been corrupted in its prosecution of science because it's been politicised. Now, I don't know whether these are deliberate lies or whether they're just sheer ignorance. I suspect that it's more groupthink combined with ignorance and incompetence because of what they dished up to us. I mean, it was embarrassing. I'll give you a quote from Willie Soon, who's an atmospheric astrophysicist and geoscientist. When we asked him what he thought about CSIRO producing the Marcotte paper as their sole paper after 40 to 50 years research, he said, 2 weeks after this is quoting Willie Soon, a professor, 2 weeks after publication, this paper was completely destroyed, and yet someone as high up as CSIRO trying to say this paper is legitimate and can be used as a supporting scientific evidence is scientific malpractice.
James.
I don't know whether they're lying or incompetent.
Well, so, I mean, I want to come back to this idea of groupthink. Is it ideological, or do you think that because the rest of the scientific community has basically created a feedback loop that says, yes, this is happening, and so the encouragement is to keep going down that path, that science has now been corrupted by what you would say is I guess a preference for papers that affirm this one particular point of view versus those who might be deemed as skeptics?
I could simply say that by saying yes, but I'll go further. As I said with Rita, that there is a lot of groupthink here. There's a lot of pressure in CSIRO to produce what the politicians want them to produce. And they have not challenged any politicians who have said things that CSIRO has not said. We've also had a look at their State of the Climate report, and we'll be coming out on that 2018 State of the Climate report, because there is straight corruption of the data. There is some corruption going on in the CSIRO. A lot of it is weakness. There's certainly a lack of leadership in there, a lack of principled leadership that is destroying the CSIRO's reputation. It was once a preeminent body, but now it's bloody hopeless.
And you're saying that they cannot basically answer the fundamental question as to whether the planet is warming up or the fundamental question whether any warming is due to man-made carbon dioxide. They have no scientific answer to those two questions upon which all the Paris Agreement and everything else is based on, and all our subsidies. Is that what you're saying, Malcolm?
Exactly, Rowan. And to have a basis of policy, you've got to have a quantified, specified impact from certain things, actions we're taking or we're producing. They have never done that. So there's no way you can have a basis for policy. And so they haven't even attributed 1/100th of a degree of temperature rise to human carbon dioxide. The issue here is not carbon dioxide, the issue is human carbon dioxide. There is no evidence anywhere from the CSIRO on that, and there's no attribution. And without that attribution, specific and quantified, there can be no policy. And even if we do enact a policy, there can be no measuring as to whether it's effective. And there certainly cannot be any measurement as to whether or not it's worth doing in terms of cost. We are looking at our country decarbonising, which is another word for deindustrialising. This is horrific. They're putting in far-reaching changes, fundamental changes to the way our society operates, the way our livelihoods, our lifestyles, the whole structure of our society is under threat here because of sheer ignorance and gutlessness on the form of various politicians and the CSIRO lacking leadership.
Malcolm Roberts, Senator Malcolm Roberts of One Nation, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders today. Thanks, mate. Coming up, we've got lots more, and we've got Army Horowitz we'll be talking to, and of course James's donkey vote in a tick.